Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. When his wife paused and looked at him, John replied, "I understand." John thought that he had often said, "I understand" in recent days, and he was really tired of saying those words. He wondered how he and Diana, his wife, had even come to this. They had been married for over 22 years. They had two wonderful children. Both went to college. They lived in a wonderful old house that Diana inherited from her grandmother. Together, they renovated the house, adding a swimming pool and a separate garage. The old house now had an open concept, layout, and a beautifully updated kitchen. He was proud of this house and thought it could rival everything they had seen on HGTV. They also had a great beach house in Hatteras, North Carolina. He resisted making any changes to the traditional beach house he inherited, preferring to leave it as he remembered it as a child. It was a place of so many wonderful family memories. John Simon Thomas was now Senior Vice President of Central Logistics and was enjoying the fruits of years of hard work. Diana Anderson Thomas has also excelled in her career. She was a senior account manager at the securities firm Richards & Son, having worked there for the last 20 years. He thought they had a perfect home, almost perfect children, a great career, and a happy marriage. So far, he often said, "I understand." But he knew that he didn't really understand what was going on with his life. Diana stops talking and looks at him. "You know what I'm trying to say. I understand." He hoped she hadn't noticed the mark he'd made on the piece of paper in front of him. He looked at the paper, 32 marks. In the last 2 days, he said to his wife, "I understand" 32 times. "It's time to put an end to this debate." "So we finally agreed," Diana said. "I'm going to step outside of our marriage once to experience this." She stopped when she saw John shaking his head. John looked into Diana's eyes and replied, "I will never cheat on you, and I will not agree that you cheat on me." "I've never cheated on you," Diana exclaimed. John continued, "I'm ready to forgive you for the deception you've committed up to this point. But that's all now." "I've never cheated on you," Diana replied defiantly. "Yes, you cheated, at least in my opinion. And if you are honest in your thoughts, then you know it. You had lunch with him alone a few times. He met you several times at Bachelorette parties and turned those evenings into actual dates. You had extensive text correspondence with him, especially on weekends." John paused and looked deep into her eyes, forcing Diana to lower her head. Now he has a high-end room booked at the Jefferson Hotel and 2 seats for their Sunday brunch. His intentions are obvious. You have a bold new dress hidden in the back of your closet. A Victoria's Secret bag filled with new underwear. I assume it's just for his eyes, since you hid it from me. Your intentions are also obvious. John stopped and waited for an answer, which never came. He continued, "I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to make sure that we both understand what's going to happen. I suggest 2 options. I'm going to the beach house this Saturday morning. I'm going to have breakfast at the Virginia Diner, and then I'm going to the beach. I'd like you to come with me. We can spend the weekend discussing our problems and wondering if we can save our marriage. It would be nice if you returned the underwear you bought for him and picked up something for us to have fun with." John paused, trying to gauge Diana's reaction. Again, he couldn't read her mind, which he had never had a problem with until recently. "Your other option is to continue your plans for Saturday. Go to a meeting with David Summers at the Jefferson Hotel, arrange a pleasant romantic dinner at the Bookbinder's Restaurant, dance at the Tobacco Company Club, and return to Jefferson to make your romance complete." "Look at me." She slowly raised her head. "You can continue with your plans. You won't need my permission, because the moment I leave without you on Saturday morning, our marriage will end." Diana looked at John dumbfounded. How did he know about their weekend plans? She slowly began to speak. Before she could say a word, John said, "In case you're wondering, I have friends where you work. You have friends at work who worry about you. And finally, David Summers doesn't have any real friends at all." Diana paused as she realized what John had told her. Then she tried to go on the offensive. "I have been your faithful wife and partner for 22 years. No, you've been a faithful wife for 21 years and 10 months. You've been cheating on me since your first lunch with David Summers." "I've never cheated on you," Diana pleads. "You've already been in love with him," John began to say. Diana jumped up and interrupted him. "I've never cheated on you." With a sadness that surprised Diana, John continued, I saw the betrayal in your eyes. The eyes that were always glued to mine when we were making love. The eyes that are now closing. The face that turns away from my gaze in bed. How many times were you with him when we were making love? John laughed sadly. We used to fantasize about a threesome with another woman or another man. I assume that you have already been able to make this fantasy come true. We've had an overflowing bed for the last few months. Now I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Do you understand? Diana thought that things were not going the way she had planned. She tried to get the upper hand. John, we have a wonderful marriage. I value our relationship and your love more than anything in the world. We raised two wonderful children together. We have a great career, and if we stick to our course, we can retire early and really enjoy life in each other. I have been faithful to you and am ready to be by your side as a loving wife for the rest of our days. I'll give you the rest of my days. I only need one day for me. And one night for him, was John's quick reply. Diana lowered her eyes and shook her head. She looked at John. I could just go behind your back. I could have lied to you, but I wanted to be honest with you. I thought after all these years you'd understand. John answered quickly again. I understand, and as for lying and acting behind my back, that's exactly what you've been doing for the last few months. You went on dates with him under the guise of a bachelorette party. You dined with him in an intimate setting, holding hands and letting his hands wander over your body, which only I should have access to. And worst of all, you brought him into our bedroom, replacing me with thoughts of him. You let him interfere with our time with hundreds of messages. Diana, I know everything, and how I found out doesn't matter. What's important is that you understand what I'm talking about. Do you understand? Diana was just looking at him with eyes that he no longer understood. He sighed softly, realizing that she didn't understand what she was throwing away. John got up and left the room. He went to their bedroom, brushed his teeth, and tried to fall asleep, but he knew it would be difficult to fall asleep that night. Diana sat motionless for several minutes. Finally, she moved to the couch, picked up the phone, and called her friend Janice. When Janice answered, Diana said, John knows everything. He knows about David and our plans for this weekend. Janice replied, It doesn't sound very good. Please tell me you're going to cancel this. Diana replied softly, I do not know how I can. I promised David, and he spent so much money this weekend. Janice answered quickly, You made promises to John earlier. If you don't remember, then I do. I was your bridesmaid. Summers can cancel everything, and it won't cost him a penny. Anyway, that's no reason to cheat on John. I'm not cheating on John, Diana said again. You're cheating, Janice replied. When I was talking about what George and I did, I was trying to make sure that you understood that I would never have done this without his permission. Besides, I told you that we chose a man together and made sure that it was someone we would never see again. I told you that we did everything right, but nevertheless we still have problems that we are trying to solve. You decided to sleep with a colleague and you're trying to justify it. Now Janice was begging, Please forget about this plan. Stop dating David. Get on your knees and apologize to John. Diana replied softly, But I need it. I really need to experience another man once more in my life. David is a good guy, and the women at work say he's good in bed. A good guy wouldn't sleep with a married woman, Janice said. Think about what you're risking just to become another notch on his bedpost. I'm not going to be another notch on his bedpost. He is attentive to me. Janice wanted to scream into the phone. Don't you understand that this is even worse? I met David at our bachelorette party. He's a good-looking man, but he's not even close to who John is. You have to understand that, don't you? I understand, Diana whispered. Janice begged, Please think long and carefully about your decision. It will affect all the people you love for the rest of your life. Diana said softly, I thought you'd understand. I thought you, of all people, would understand why I need to do this. Janice tried to get to her friend again. Diana, the problem is not that I don't understand. The problem is not that John doesn't understand. The problem is not that your children, or your parents, or your friends won't understand. The problem is that you don't understand. I'm begging you not to do this. Diana answered in a determined voice. Well, John knows what I've been doing up to this point, and he didn't stop me. He won't like it, but he'll let me do it. He'll understand how important this is to me. And now I need to get some sleep. After finishing the conversation, Janice turned to her husband George. She didn't understand a word I said to her. "I'm so sorry that I told her about our experience." George replied, "I thought we agreed that this would remain strictly between us." Janice was a little embarrassed. I needed to talk to someone about the problems we were having. I never thought it would give her any ideas. George hugged Janice and said, "I know, and I'm not mad. I must admit, I also talked to John about our problems." Janice lowered her head in obvious embarrassment. "You told John. I can imagine how he reacted. Did he offer to throw me to the side of the road or put a brand of a cheater on my forehead? I thought you knew John better." He asked me a number of questions. My answers to these questions made me think about us. After I finished answering his questions, he told me, "You two got into this together. You made this decision together. It turned out to be a big mistake, but you two did it together, and only you two can fix this mistake. As long as we continue to be together, work on our relationship together, everything will be fine." He made me realize that we were in this together, and we were both trying to solve our problems. This may be the reason that we are still married. Janice started crying. She said softly, "This may be the reason that we are married, and we may be the reason that he will get divorced." George shook his head, hugging his wife. "Don't blame yourself if they break up. John is right. If they don't get through this together, they won't stand a chance." Diana slipped into bed and realized that John was awake. He turned his back on her, and they both moved to opposite sides of the bed. They were 2 feet apart, but the distance seemed to be measured in miles. They got up on the alarm clock and went about their morning chores without saying a single word to each other. After Diana left for work, John relaxed for a moment and checked the list he was holding in his hands. He took time off from work today and Monday. John went through all the rooms in the house, photographing each room and its contents. He cataloged the contents of each room and marked the items he wanted to keep. He copied all their wedding and family photos from the cloud to a flash drive. He left their wedding album on the coffee table, not daring to open it. The apartments he looked at were good, but he knew he would miss this house. He will keep all the wonderful memories, but he will miss being here. He would miss the woman he couldn't stop loving and the life they had built together here. John went to meet Sandra Lewis, who was highly recommended to him. The settlement she proposed was very simple and straightforward. Diana will get a house and her retirement plan. John will keep the beach house and his retirement plan. He'll pay for her car and all her credit cards. A portion of their investment accounts will be set aside for college tuition and $10,000 per child as a charitable foundation. Then they will split the remaining funds 50-50. John looked up after reviewing the settlement offer and just nodded his head. Sandra said, "We can file the papers on Wednesday morning." John nodded again, stood up, shook her hand, and left the office. Sandra Lewis realized that her client had said very few words to her since he hired her for his divorce. All their communication was carried out by email. She sensed sadness and humility in him. Sometimes she wondered why she chose family law as her specialty. John went to the bank. He opened a separate account, transferring half of the old account to his new one. He emailed a form for making direct changes to the deposit to his company's HR department. Later, at home, he will change his payments to his new bank account. Then he went to their investment banker. He confirmed that both their signatures would be required for all invoices and transfers. John informed him that his lawyer Sandra Lewis would seize these accounts the day after Diana was served. John didn't like the look of pity and concern on the faces of his longtime advisors. He realized that they were just the first of their many acquaintances who would have the same expression when the news got out. The thought of having to tell his children about the divorce almost made him sick. Diana tried to avoid David Summers at work as much as possible. At lunchtime, they met at Maria's Cafe, a small restaurant that he liked to call their place. She was quiet and refused to hold his hand. John knew about their every move, and she couldn't shake the feeling she'd had all day that they were being watched. David Summers was oblivious to Diana's mood. "I'm excited about this weekend. Check in at the hotel at 3 p.m. Do you think we could meet a little earlier than planned? Maybe we could have some fun in the room before we go to dinner?" "I don't think so," was Diana's restrained reply. Back at the office, Diana tried to do something, but continued to look around the office. She realized that at least one, maybe several of her colleagues were acting as spies for John. After a couple of fruitless hours, She closed up for the day and left the office. Walking down the hall, Diana greeted the two new interns in her department. She stopped and looked back at the interns. She couldn't help but notice the distinctive Central Logistics logo on the sweatshirt one of them was wearing. John completed all the tasks on his list. It was 2 p.m., and he realized that he hadn't eaten all day, so he decided to have a snack. When he sat down at a table in Maria's cafe, the hostess came out and greeted him with hugs. John hugged her tightly and asked, "How's Ben doing?" Maria smiled. "He's doing great. He got on the baseball team as a rookie. He's so excited. You know that James has been a great training partner this winter. Your son changed everything." "Well, James is thrilled to have his roommate on the team with him," John replied. Maria sat down next to John and said, "They were here for lunch again today, but all was not well in paradise." Diana was very nervous, and of course Summers didn't understand anything. "He may be ignorant, but he's going to sleep with her this weekend," John replied dejectedly. "Don't rush to give it up. She must be a special woman if you've been married for so long. She realizes her mistake, and I just pray that it happens sooner rather than later," Maria replied. "So, Maryland crab patties with broccoli?" John smiled for the first time that day. "It sounds perfect, and maybe a beer for a change. Surprise me with one of your light Alash." Diana returned home early and started putting her backup plan into action. She planned to cook John's favorite dinner and then try to talk to him again. It was important to her that he agreed to her one-time date. If he doesn't agree to this, she needs him to at least accept her actions. When the crab cakes were baked, she went upstairs and changed her clothes. She wanted to look good for him, and then planned to meet Janice and her other friend Lisa for a drink and discuss the important day one last time on Saturday. She took the Victoria's Secret clothes and bags out of her closet and went to her car, carefully putting them in the trunk of her car. She didn't want to embarrass either John or herself by flaunting them in front of him. John came home at his usual time and was surprised to hear the smell of cooking dinner. Diana came into the living room and handed him a bottle of light beer. "Please take off your jacket and tie and sit down. Dinner will be on the table in a couple of minutes." John smiled at the sight of the Maryland-style crab cakes and steamed broccoli she brought him. He was glad, because it was his favorite dish, but for the first time he realized that he would prefer to eat at Maria's cafe. At this moment, he would rather be anywhere but at home. While they were having dinner in silence, Diana decided to try again to make him understand why she needed to do this. "John, I love you and I pray that you understand why." John interrupted her. "I understand. You look really good today. Are you going somewhere?" "Yes, I'm going to meet Janice and Lisa for a couple drinks later tonight. But I'm trying to tell you that I love you and I hope for you." "Yes, yes, you hope I understand," John said coldly. "I really understand." He stopped eating and moved away from the table. Getting up, he said, "I've lost my appetite." As he left, he told her, "You look very good for him. I think you couldn't wait until tomorrow. When you see David Summers tonight, tell him to drop dead for me." John disappeared into the living room, and the sound of the TV filled the dining room. Diana was sitting quietly at the table with her head in her hands. For the first time, she seriously reconsidered her actions. After a few minutes, she got up and cleared the table. Now was not the time to hesitate. She needed to stay true to her feelings. She wrote to Janice, "Can we meet earlier? I'm leaving in 5 minutes." John heard the front door open and close. He drank his beer and looked at the TV. He realized that he had been sitting there for 20 minutes and had no idea which channel he was watching. He felt sadness pressing down on his chest, like a huge weight that made it almost impossible for him to breathe. John pulled the box out of his coat pocket. He popped 2 pills into his mouth and washed them down with the rest of the beer. For the first time in his life, he took sleeping pills. He knew he couldn't sleep without help. He also knew that he would need all his strength for Saturday morning. Diana went to the bar first and booked a table for 3. While waiting, she noticed the scene in the bar. Men and women danced the dance of seduction, but to Diana it seemed like a dance of despair and loneliness. Was this her fate? The appearance of her friends saved her from these thoughts. Diana watched her 2 friends approach the table. She noticed that they seemed tense and braced herself for their attack. Lisa sat down and looked at Diana. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Are you crazy? Are you going through menopause? Or did you start taking illegal substances?" Or did you fall and hit your head? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard anyone say, and I used to think you were one of the smartest people I know. If you do this, you must be the dumbest fool I've ever met." Diana simply replied to her friend, "Good evening to you too, Lisa." "Yes, I'm fine, but what about you?" Lisa just looked at her. Diana could see the anger and pain in her eyes. Diana turned to Janice. "It's your turn." Janice shook her head. "You know how I feel about this adventure of yours." "I would say more, but I'm afraid I can't be as polite as Lisa." Diana smiled sadly. "You think you could swear better than Lisa?" Janice replied without smiling. "Well, no one can swear better than Lisa, but she missed the word fool, and perhaps the worst of all disappointments. But there's one thing I really have to tell you. I think you're planning to make the biggest mistake of your life, but I love you, and I'll be here to help you no matter what you do." Lisa just shook her head. Damn, damn, damn. What you want to do is so wrong and so stupid, but I'll be here for you too. Just so you know, I'm going to say, I told you so over and over again." Diana hugged her friends. "Thank you for your love. I know you can't support what I'm doing, but it's wonderful to know that I can count on both of you after this. You both know that I don't do anything by halves. I have made a commitment, and it is time for me to bring this matter to its natural conclusion." Lisa pleaded softly. "Diana, there is nothing natural about cheating, and commitment to cheating is the opposite of the true meaning of the word commitment." Diana sat quietly for a few minutes and then got up and said, "I need to finish my business for tomorrow. I'll bring a bottle of wine. Please stay and drink to me." Diana completed her errands and drove up to the dark house. She gathered her thoughts and then sent Janice a long text message. She knew Janice was angry with her, but she also knew that her friend would help her. She opened the trunk of her car. She realized that she couldn't leave her purchases in the car overnight. Tomorrow it would be too cold to put them on. She hid them in the closet in the hallway downstairs. After that, she slid into bed next to John and tried to fall asleep. Sleep did not come to Diana that night. Finally, at 3 a.m., she got out of bed and went downstairs. She saw the wedding album on the coffee table and thought that if John could watch their wedding album, then so could she. After reviewing 2 pages, she closed the album and began to cry. She had to make him understand. At 5 a.m., she gave up the idea of sleeping and went to the bathroom to take a shower. After the shower, she put on some of the VS underwear and then opened her clothes bag and put on the beautiful thing that was in it. She took out the suitcase she had packed earlier and carried it to the car. She then placed the Victoria's Secret bag next to the suitcase. She went into the kitchen and wrote a short note to John. She chuckled to herself. She was leaving him a letter from Dear John. She put the note on the coffee machine, turned off the light, and went to the car, determined to finish what she had started. John woke up and looked at the alarm clock. It was 6:15, and when he turned around, he realized that he was sleeping alone. It occurred to him that she hadn't waited for tonight, so he pushed her towards David Summers. He imagined that she was lying in David Summers' bed, and this picture struck him to the depths of his soul. For the first time, he overestimated himself. Should he have just let her spend one night to test another man? She promised to belong only to him after that one night. Did he lose the happiness of his whole life because of his ego and pride? Reflecting on his plight, John realized that he would never be able to love her again if she went to David Summers. He lived with the fact that she put her children first, because that's what a mother should do, but he could never live with the fact that she put another man above her husband. For 22 years, they have both earned each other's respect and loyalty. She didn't expect anything less. He wouldn't accept anything less. He hoped she was at home. Maybe she was sleeping in one of the other bedrooms. John checked all the bedrooms and found no signs that she had returned home that night. When he entered the kitchen, he saw a note on the coffee maker. He opened the letter and read a short note. "Please understand." That's all she wrote. Falling back onto one of the kitchen chairs, John began to cry. He was afraid of this, but deep down he still expected her to stay, to forget this crazy idea, to remain his wife. After making coffee, he went upstairs. He quickly showered and dressed, then stuffed a duffel bag with some clothes and went downstairs. John filled his thermos with coffee and headed for the front door. After taking one last long look at the house that was his home, he turned off the light and closed the door. The cold morning air hit him in the face as he walked down the steps. He forgot to start the car, but he thought that the cold would help him wake up and perhaps bring him out of the stupor he was experiencing. As he walked to his car, he realized that the engine was running. He opened the back door, and when he put his bag inside, he saw a suitcase and a Victoria's Secret bag in the back seat. In the passenger seat, he saw Diana sleeping in the car. He quietly closed the back door and stopped, reaching for the door handle. He cried tears of joy at the sight of his wife, his love. Now he knew they had a chance. John took a deep breath and opened the car door. When he got into the car, Diana stirred and looked at John. "Good morning," she whispered softly, rubbing her eyes. "Good morning." After a short pause, he asked, "How long have you been here?" Diana looked at her watch and answered, "About 2 o'clock. I couldn't sleep, and then I was worried that you'd leave without me, so I decided to wait in the car. I filled up the car and bought us a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts for the trip." John opened a box of donuts and said, "There are only 7 donuts here." Diana finally woke up and answered, "There were a dozen for 2, and I've already eaten my share." Smiling, John grabbed one of the donuts and let it melt in his mouth. "It'll keep me going until we have breakfast at Virginia's diner. How do you like their rustic ham and cream cookies?" Diana shook her head. "I'm not dressed to go to Virginia's diner." John was confused. "Diana, there is no dress code in Virginia's diner. You can wear anything there." Diana smiled. "I know that you can wear almost anything, but you can't not wear almost anything." When she finished speaking, she opened her coat to show John a purple set of underwear. "Well, that's almost nothing," John agreed. "Is the coat new?" Diana replied, "Yes, I changed my dress for this gorgeous coat. In case you didn't check the Victoria's Secret bag, I returned the other underwear and bought these things especially for you." Diana put her hand on his chin and lifted his head so that he looked into her eyes. "This outfit and the body underneath it are for your eyes, and only for your eyes for all the days and nights of our lives." After a short pause, she continued, "I'm sorry for the hell I've put you through in the last few months. You were right about almost everything. There were only 2 things you were wrong about. Last night I dressed for you and no one else, and I actually met Janice and Lisa. The second thing you were wrong about was that when we were making love, I was making love to David. David never entered our bedroom. I didn't close my eyes to think about him, but I couldn't look you in the eye because I was so ashamed of what I wanted to do. I'm ashamed to admit that the shame I felt didn't stop me from planning to be with him." She looked at him and said softly, "Now I really understand." He kissed her. They had a lot to talk about. They had a lot of work to do to rebuild their marriage, but his heart leapt with joy when he realized that she finally understood. As John drove past the Virginia diner, he looked at Diana. She fell asleep again shortly after they reached the highway. He remembered everything he had done on Friday. They had a lot to talk about, and he understood that any honest conversation should include his confession. John remembered that evening 7 years ago. He was in San Francisco for the quarterly corporate meeting. At that time, he was the head of the department, and his adventure brought huge benefits to the company. Foreign companies were buying up their American competitors, but John saw an interesting opportunity. He advocated the idea of buying an Italian company with excellent engineers but serious money problems. His mentor, the CEO, approved the purchase, and it was a great success. The purchase brought them several teams of experienced engineers. A big plus was the access to the European market that this company provided to the rest of the corporation and the strong presence of the Italian company in the Chinese market. The deal eventually brought in billions of dollars. This was the crowning achievement of the CEO's career and put John on the path to an accelerated corporate career. Diana was at home in Virginia that night with the boys at a school band concert. So John celebrated his success with his colleagues and especially with Debbie Maris, a wonderful marketing representative from another division. Debbie and he had a long-term business relationship, like a friendly flirtation. He drank just enough to loosen his inhibitions, but not enough to lower his libido. They danced much closer than a married man should with someone other than his wife. She pressed against his leg and rubbed his erection through his pants. When she put her panties in his open palm, they headed to her room. They kissed and caressed each other in the elevator. He freed her breasts, and Debbie tossed him her blouse and bra before the elevator door opened, and they quickly walked to her room. He watched as she unzipped her skirt and, standing naked in the open doorway, reached for his hand. But John couldn't move. He realized that it was physically impossible for him to enter this room. He knew that his erection had left him. For the first time in a few hours, he thought about his wife and the wonderful family he had at home. He looked at the beautiful Debbie Maris and couldn't think of any reason to come into the room. He took 2 steps back and then ran, literally ran, back to the elevator. He went into his room and took a shower, wanting to get rid of the smell of Debbie. It was 1 o'clock in the morning at their house in Richmond, but he called Diana. He needed to hear her voice. After a few rings, she sleepily picked up the phone. John assured Diana that he was fine and nothing bad had happened, and then told her the good news. He told her about the success of his adventure and the promotion with a huge increase in salary. He cried when she excitedly told him how proud she was of him and how she always knew he would succeed. She told him how much she loved him. Through his tears, he realized that he had almost shared one of the greatest moments of his life with the wrong woman. Diana's opinion and happiness were all that mattered to him. When John was driving to the beach, he knew he had to tell her. He had to make her understand why he really understood her feelings. He was in her place, and that's why he could listen to her and honestly say, "I understand." As soon as Diana returned to the family morally completely, David Summers ceased to be of any interest to her, John, or the author. But inquisitive minds want to know. The epilogue. David Summers was sitting alone in Fred Davis's office at Richards & Sons. Fred was the vice president of human resources, and David was sent to his office as soon as he walked in that Monday morning. He didn't understand why he was here. Okay, he had recently missed a couple of deadlines in the pursuit of Diana, but he felt he could quickly catch up. The meeting messed up his plans for this morning. He needed to talk to Diana about what had happened over the weekend. Not only did she set him up, but she also sent 2 of her friends, Janice and Lisa, to tell him about it. David remembered how afraid he was of this woman, Lisa. His father had served in the Navy for 25 years, but he was no match for how this woman could swear. She embarrassed him right there in the lobby of the Jefferson Hotel. He remembered that even the hotel security seemed afraid to interfere. When he turned to return to his seat, he froze when he saw the photo on Fred Davis's desk. It was a family portrait of Fred, his 3 sons, and his smiling wife. Now he knew the last name of the woman who had scolded him so thoroughly, Lisa Davis. Now he understood why he was here.